You guys were now working into May 3rd, May 4th, May 5th. Very, very little sleep. Just in terms of how you guys worked through that huge challenge of sleep deprivation, this intensity, the pressure of the whole event, maybe even on a personal front, how, thinking about it retrospectively, of those sort of 36, 48 hours, how would you describe it? I mean, obviously intense, but in terms of just going and managing it, really.
Yeah, so we worked for about 40 hours straight initially, and it was pure adrenaline high, keeping you going. There's nothing else there in the tank. By the time, so we actually got evacuated out of our first REOC, and then we had to be evacuated about 50 kilometers south, and then we got evacuated again out of that facility later on that night. So at that point, you're running on absolute fumes, and I think it was 9 o'clock at night when I was trying to leave there, maybe even later, and I had to drive about 200K south after working for 40 hours, and that was the hardest drive I'll ever have to do in my life. I can guarantee you that. Yeah. And staying awake through that was absolutely horrendous, to be quite frank. And then we did end up getting down to Lac La Biche at the evacuation center and sleeping there for the first night. We had an actual bed and some food, which is amazing. And that was an amazing recharge, just getting that little bit. But then the next day we drove back up in through the fire and back to the REOC, and then it was back to, sleeping on cot, no shower, no hot water, no working bathrooms, all that kind of fun stuff. No real food or anything like that. You're eating just garbage to try and keep yourself going. But from a mental standpoint and emotional standpoint, I mean, you're assigned a job and you had a job to do, so everyone just sort of did it. And when there's people, for example, who are keeping to work while they've lost their homes, they lost their pet that was in that home, they knew that, but they were still working. I mean, how could you not? I think that's the biggest thing, that there was a number of incredible motivators in our group because their work ethic was so strong. And then we also had some really great leaders who really made sure that we knew we were taken care of. So the leadership, and it was always looking out for us. It took the time to take that extra second to make sure that we were okay and that we were good to keep going, and really looked out for us for that period.
Yeah, I think like some of the most powerful moments that I can think of are, seeing Darby or seeing Dale. So Darby Allen is our regional fire chief and was the DEM, the Director of Emergency Management, is the person at the top of the ICS structure. And then you have your deputy DEM, who's Dale Benfeld. He's former lieutenant colonel in the Canadian Armed Forces, was in Kelowna for the wildfires there. Seeing those guys stop and take 10 seconds to just, say 10 words to someone, it was really powerful. I think that we were I don't know if it was chance or just the fact that, this was a well-planned structure, but it seemed as if we really got the best of the best who could be in that room at the time. And you really do feed off the energy of the people who are around you. When you see someone when you're working with someone and then they walk away and someone else tells you that that person's house is burning down right now, and they're there still working, it really, that does motivate you. There's a really intense connection that forms with those people that there's people that I never worked with before, worked with them for 40 hours, never worked with them again, but anytime I see them, we're tight, and that's something that you'll never really lose.
Because you were in that intense situation, because you guys had to evacuate a couple times in terms of REOC. How did you know, or did you? How did you know that some of the messaging and some of the work that you were doing in terms of communications, a lot of it through Twitter, was working? Was it purely a fact of just playing the numbers and the fact that everybody was safe? Unfortunately, we had those two fatalities due to exhaustion on the road, but how did you know?
I mean, luckily we had a very binary message. It's you need to leave and you either go north or you go south. And the dividing, the decision point was a very literal geographic feature. Is if you were north of the Athabasca River, you're going north. If you're south, you're going south. And that was a very clear message to be able to deliver. I don't really think that we knew for a number of weeks if we'd actually been successful. There wasn't, I don't think either of us ever stopped and had the discussion with each other, but you were aware of the fact that people might be in danger and that lives might be lost, but you don't really stop. You kind of have to push it.
We made some cognitive decisions too in terms of how we were issuing our notices. And that was, we actually ended up doing, we would write out our message in a screenshot and then screenshot it and then post it as an image. And that ended up being really, really valuable to us. And because we knew, and we actually get feedback from that in terms of people would say, oh, like, what about this neighborhood? And then we'd make sure that we would include that in the next one, in the next update that we would post. But that making that decision and going through that process was really, really paid dividends, just because it allowed us to either just direct people back to we would pin it to the top of our timeline, so we could send them there, and then other people in the community actually started directing people there. It's like, it's in their most recent tweet, go look at that, go look at their timeline. And so we'd always post the most recent update right there, and then we could also have people who didn't even have Twitter looking at that last post sort of thing to make sure that would be the first thing they would see.
We did see a lot of new stuff. I would confidently say we saw a lot of new signups, because you'd see accounts with no messages. First tweet is to us, and their username is a generic alphanumeric username that probably was auto-generated, and they just signed up. So that was, you know that at least the content and the quality of your messaging is good enough that people are breaking through that barrier of an app they'd never used before to get access and have that back and forth. It's not just, I want to read your content, it's I want to respond, I want to engage with you. So I think that was pretty encouraging early on. We can see that.
We also knew right away, just by the basis of the numbers that we were getting on retweets, that it was getting out there, and it was amplifying in the way that we the best way that we had at that time.